to get out?
The message that I want to get out is that there is a huge difference in America between white Americans and black Americans. They treated very differently, and although I do not want white Americans to experience what we have experienced from the police, I want the police to come to an agreement with the same protection Americans have. Latinos, we need the same protection for Latinos. We all want to be treated like people. That's it. Police brutality is out of control. When a black person gets abused by the police, it's like, okay, whatever, we have to riot. When a white person does something, I saw a white woman punch a police officer, and they still kindly asked her to detain herself until she fell and tripped, and then they zip tied her. But a black man jaywalking is going to get pulled over and thrown to the ground. That's not okay.
Let's talk to me about tonight, though. When you see the damage all through the area, what do you make of
it? It is necessary. You know why? Because this is how we feel every day walking down the street. We don't get to see the beautiful buildings that everybody else gets to see. We get to feel like we don't belong there. We get to feel like trash. We get to feel like garbage. We get to feel like part of it. And if they don't want us to be a part of it, we want you to see what our reality is like. This is what we feel like when we walk down. This is what it's like to walk down the streets. And this chaos. I'm afraid every time a police officer drives past me. I have a clean record. I have never committed a crime. Law-abiding citizen. I have gone to college. Yet I get pulled over every time I'm driving my car because it's a 2020.
And what, playing devil's advocate, because there are those that are saying this won't change it, this doesn't answer it, we need to do something differently. Violence doesn't beget violence. What do you say to that?
I say that the police need to change because they forgot that they work for us. The police work for us. They work for the people. Since when do you get to go to work and tell us what to do? Since when do you get to go to work and tell your boss to get on the ground? When do you get to go into the office and kill him and then still keep your job? And everybody loves you.
Tell me about the curfew tonight. There's an 8 o'clock curfew. Are you planning on staying out, and what are you kind of sensing with that when you're out here tonight?
It's after 8 o'clock, and they absolutely issued the curfew because we were peacefully protesting. We were all kneeling. We were kneeling. We were not violating anything, and they started to throw smoke bombs at us. They shot rubber bullets. We caught a police officer lighting a car. Hitting that on us. We did not do that.
I know that I saw myself, some of the protesters were not that peaceful that were throwing rocks and bottles to initiate. So that is part of why the reaction comes, is it not?
Yeah, it's not. But one thing that I absolutely want to say is that there's a group of angels out here. There's a group of angels. They are Caucasian, and they are out doing extraction. They are coming, barricading us from the police, from the bullets, and they are offering rides to people, free rides. They're letting us come in to their cars. A stranger got us out. We're here to get other people out. We have our car nearby, and we're just trying to save people out of jail. Coronavirus is here. We don't want anybody to get sick.
Can you tell me what's your first and last name?
I'm Jane Doe.
Where are you from, Jane?
I'm from Los Angeles. I actually was born in Los Angeles, California.
It's part of this. This is not. I know you want change, and it needs to happen. Does it break your heart in a way, though, to see this much damage kind of throughout the area, that this is what it's taking?
Listen, it breaks my heart every day that I have to be afraid for my life. Breaks my heart. Right now, we're controlling the situation per se because we actually know what's happening and we're getting our message across.
How do we change people's perceptions, though? How do we really change the race relations in this country? How do we make a difference?
We bring awareness because you know how many people don't know who George Floyd is? So many people know the guy with the knee on his neck. They don't know his name. We have to let them know the story. If you know the story, you'll know his name. If you know his name, then you'll know that it's wrong. And if you know it's wrong, then you'll stop. Or maybe when the officer had his knee on his neck, what if all those people standing by rushed that cop? They would have all gotten beaten, maybe tied, but he'd be alive. And I can't sit at home right now and stay there watching all of this on the news and not help because I'm able-bodied. I have no children. I'm not married. I'm able-bodied, and I'm suffering, and everybody else is suffering, and it's my duty as an American to protect us.
I appreciate your time very much, Jane. I really do. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us. Be safe tonight. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Mark Brown. Click the ABC7 logo to subscribe to our Eyewitness News YouTube channel.
poisoning people is ultimately what you're doing.
It's the same mystery tormenting Prince's family. Or keep them, or confine them, or retain them, whatever it is. There are rules that govern what your response to them is, right? I mean, I've seen somebody jumps in is a foot away from you, yelling at you, yelling obscenities. You can't really arrest them, right? There's nothing. They're within their right to do that.
Yeah. That's a real valid point, because you have to sit there as an officer or a deputy or even a state police officer in that skirmish line, and you have to take it. You cannot react. If you've reacted, then you've kind of lost the battle, so to speak, because they want a reaction, to put it on camera, to put it on the cell phone, so they can put it on social media, which, social media drives a lot of these protests. Meet at the corner of here to do whatever we're going to do. But yeah, you have to be very, very focused, very disciplined, which is really a great word, and that's why you have those linebackers and those supervisors who, and I have visited them, where I have the deputy by the back of his desk and say, "Oh, calm down." And that's our job as supervisors, to maintain the line integrity and make sure no one is going beyond tunnel vision.
Right, and it's a fine line between responding and escalating. Correct. I mean, and that these are decisions that are made kind of higher up the chain of command. How and where to respond, where to pull back, where to let the crowd kind of run their course, even though they might be blocking streets. Because I noticed during this afternoon, when the protests kind of began around 5:15, 5:30, there was not a huge police presence. There was a group of about 100 people, and they were walking around Hope Street, 7th Street, and just kind of going up and down the street, and police were kind of letting them go. They weren't causing any property damage, they weren't hurting anybody, and they kept moving. But what entails a decision to confront, to stop, and to disperse?
Like you said, they declared an unlawful assembly. and that is done for a variety of massive property damage. You're having areas impacted that traffic that people can get through, like on the freeway. You're having officers injured. So at that point, you say, you know what, or auto assembly, everybody's going to leave. However, you have to give them exit lanes to leave. And that's something that's discussed before you make that call, because you just can't say, oh, you can't stand here. My question is, where do you want me to go?
Right. You can't box them in. You've got to, that's an old, I think it's from The Art of War. You've got to give your enemy a chance to, not enemy, we shouldn't treat them as enemies, of course, but in the figurative sense here, you've got to give your opponent a place to go, to retreat. Otherwise, they will continue.
Correct.
So,
yes, very much so.
All right. Well, so we are seeing these tactics employed, and unfortunately, in so many cities across the country, and it's symptomatic of what has been a historic problem, where police officers, some of them, have not treated people well, have treated people badly, and in some places arguably committed murder. That is the charge that's facing that one officer in Minneapolis, and a lot of folks there saying it's not enough just to charge him with third-degree murder. It's not enough just to charge only him. He had 3 other people who were there with him, and nobody stopped him from kneeling on this guy. Nobody stopped him from doing what he was doing. Nobody listened to the cries of this man saying, I can't breathe. And they were there not only to effect an arrest, but to make sure that, they were responsible for his safety as well. And I think that's what's got people so upset here.
Yeah, Mark, just as a footnote, and, you hit it right on the, when you have a use of force, and officers involved in the use of force, the best place to put that person is in a patrol car. Get them off the ground, if that's where they are. In a patrol car, close the doors, so you just had a fight with. That's what the other officers should have done. And in this case, the other 3, I don't know what they were thinking and what they were doing, but not only.
And the image that I keep going back to, that I see, and what was so striking about this is how casual about it. It doesn't, they didn't seem to be the actions or the posture, the body posture, I'm talking about the officer, of someone who was under threat. He had his hand in his pocket. I think he had both hands in both pockets while he's kneeling on this guy, on George Floyd. I shouldn't say this guy. He had a name, George Floyd. And to be kneeling in such a casual way while he is literally gasping for breath and begging for you to just let him breathe, not let me go, but let me breathe. It's very striking, and in this age in which video is so prevalent, in which not only officers wear body cameras, but you can just be assumed that every interaction with the public is being in some way recorded. It's striking that still takes place.
Yeah, and as a former supervisor for a major law enforcement agency in Southern California, and I've investigated hundreds of, probably close to 500 uses of force where I've had to investigate, talk to people that have been involved. When I saw it, I was just appalled. I mean, and my wife was asking me, she goes, what's going on there? And I'm trying to explain to her, and obviously my friends have asked me, not as an expert, but as, a supervisor, and I'm like, I don't get it. The other officer was talking on the radio, and it was like, go over to your fellow officer, tap him on the shoulder, and say, okay, let's get this guy up. At the time, I think it was 8 minutes,
right,
with his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck. That is just appalling.
Right. And we've seen, I've seen it from the air. You've seen at the end of a pursuit where they're swarming somebody, and I've seen it any number of times where one officer seems to be getting his licks in, getting a little overzealous in trying to subdue the suspect, who may in fact be fighting. And I've seen other officers, pull him back. Hey, okay, we got this. Or you move back, I'm moving in. You can see it. And so it does happen. And,
and what you're talking about is post-pursuit discipline, where the officers, you're amped up. You just chase this guy for an hour, or maybe some of the pursuits that you and I have been involved in, 2 hours. And you really want this guy, and you're angered because he's done this, but you can't do those things. This isn't the 1950s and 40s and the 20s.
And more importantly, this is America, where even the accused, especially the accused, have rights that protect them from unlawful use of force and unlawful detention and things like that. Somebody may have done something heinous. In this case, obviously, Mr. Floyd did not. It was a $20 bill that he may or may not have known was counterfeit, that he used to buy a pack of cigarettes, and this ended up with his death.
Yeah, what I used to tell my personnel mark, I would always remind them, this is not personal. This is business.
Right.
They're not assaulting you because you're you. They're assaulting you because of the uniform you're wearing, or they don't want to go to jail. And the mindset. This is not a personal attack.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Also, difficult to follow in the heat of the moment for a lot of people, a lot of very otherwise normal people might find that hard.
Yeah, very, very much so. Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is I tell people when I'm telling my wife and friends and things like that is, I said, when's the last time you've been in a fight?
Right.
Grade school, and you're in a fight to win, but you're in a fight more to handcuff and secure something, so you can't use the same tactics that they're going to use against you. And that's why your training, your expertise, your plan to take someone into custody is very tantamount.
Yeah. Well, we're watching now. Remind me here, what's on the left? On the left is L.A., of course, and is also L.A., ground video from Los Angeles. So we're seeing it from two perspectives. And I'd love to find out where each one of these is, because these are two different locations. If somebody could tell me in my ear. But man, it's really troubling to see this, troubling to see the pictures of what started all of this, of course, and then to see what's happening here. And what you really want, the mayor, okay, on the left now here, it's First and Spring Streets in downtown LA, so that's right near City Hall. And on the right, we're going to find out where that is. I think that is a little north of there. But okay, we're going to find, but when the mayor put out a call for people to express their outrage, do it peacefully. He was as outraged by what he saw as so many other people. Yet you gotta do it peacefully, and hopefully that will prevail. But it can be a very near thing. And can you talk about the impact that one or two people in a crowd can have on whether things stay peaceful or whether things really go sideways quickly?
Yeah, that has you have what you call instinctors, and unfortunately you have a very peaceful crowd which may be doing just that, a very peaceful, law-abiding protest. Sometimes they've even contacted the local police agency and say, hey, we're going to do this. We work with them. And LAPD has done that. I know they have, because I've sat in those meetings. But you have a couple of people from outside groups, and I won't mention their names because I don't want to give them publicity, but their whole purpose is to incite a violent or some sort of reaction from the crowd to break windows, smash cars, light things on fires, that kind of thing. And those groups, they have one purpose, and that is their purpose.
Just right. Okay. So what we're looking at here, okay, somebody's on Wilshire, so I'm guessing the video on the right is on Wilshire Boulevard in downtown LA. We saw a bus that had been tagged. We saw an LAPD cruiser that had been tagged and vandalized by somebody with a skateboard. It's interesting. We're seeing these skateboards being used more and more as weapons, as instruments in demonstrations. I've seen it in pretty much every city that we've been covering. There's guys running around skateboards. All of a sudden, the skateboard gets used like a baseball bat, and there goes a window. There goes, whatever it is they're hitting.
Years and years ago, at a federal building, before, and then they have lighter fluid, the old butane cans. Put them on there, light them, and then roll them into the skirmish lines of the officers.
Oh, wow.
So it becomes very dangerous. Also, then they have squirt bottles filled with lighter fluid and or urine, and squirted at the officers also. So there's all sorts of various third world tactics, I call them, that some of these groups will use, hiding under the good group that's protesting.
And you can't tell as an officer looking at a group of 100 people who's gonna, who's rearing back to throw, what's contained, whatever bottle they've got. That must be part of the tension for an officer who's dealing with this.
Sure it is. You're on the line. You've got 200 people yelling at you, screaming at you, calling you names, and you're just like, okay, I didn't do anything. You hate me so much, and part of it is when you have a protest. That's why you'll deploy undercover officers in the crowd, specific scouts, to see and weed out the troublemakers, almost kind of keep an eye on them so that you can have other officers move in and take them out of the problem. So the protest is a peaceful, law-abiding protest.
Well, what we have on the left now, First and Spring, that's basically LA City Hall. On the right, 7th and Flower. That group is moving. That group seems to be on the move. This group seems to be disrupting traffic. They're all, at this point, violating an unlawful assembly order that is taking place in downtown Los Angeles. On the right, 7th and Flower. Left is very close to L at First and Spring Street. Two different set. I mean, when you've got large groups of people in different locations, that complicates matters too, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, like you said, you've got splinter groups that are maybe over by City Hall, the Federal Building, the 101 freeway, and so your mobile field force, which you've now called in to help with the problem, your assets are being dispersed and they're being spread out, and that's why the citywide tactical alert is called, to get officers from every division: Venice, Topanga, Foothill, Sylmar. Anywhere there's a station, those officers are now being called to downtown LA to deal with the problem. Officers that are on duty are not going to be going home anytime soon.
Wow. Okay. So again, the folks on the right, they were at 7th and Flower. We're told they're going eastbound on 7th, so they're eastbound. They're at 7th and Hope Street right now. I'm going to see if I can pull up a map and see if there is a freeway on-ramp in their future, and whether they're going to try to do that if they're continuing in that direction. Oh, they're going. Okay, they're going away from the 110 freeway, so that's good news. So now what you have, it does seem that things have sort of calmed down in terms of the projectiles being thrown, in terms of any property being damaged. I mean, that's just from our kind of the view that I have here, compared to what it was like an hour ago, where there are, you saw people being engaged with pepper ball rounds and throwing things at the police, 2 officers being injured. All of that happened earlier. We saw 1 officer being evacuated on an ambulance with an injured hand. It is, and see, okay, I keep getting confused because there's one image we have. We've got a bank of monitors here on the set here, and there's one shot I keep looking at, and I think that's San Francisco. So I keep looking at that, going, that is not LA, is it? And where is it? So, all right, let's take a look at San Francisco for a second here. And what you've got there, and I don't know what part of it's obvious in the down, just a large crowd, several large crowds of people kind of milling about. And there was a fire set. I don't know if you can see it in the center of the screen. We don't have any control over this camera. This is KGO's camera in their helicopter. But in the center of the screen there, I believe that is a fire that was set at a bus stop that I saw being ignited a few minutes ago. So that is a little different situation there, and it's been pretty wild there. People getting on the freeway in San Francisco, people getting on the freeway in Houston, and of course we have Minneapolis, where it is just it's really been just a terrible situation. This is Seattle here on the right side of your screen. Looks like a small. Seattle has been known for demonstrations that have gone very, very badly in the past, in particular with when the what was it? An economic organization that that showed up. Death to the Klan is the sign that they're carrying. So that is the scene in Seattle. A smaller group there. It appears maybe things have down in that city. LA, though, still a citywide tactical alert. And two large groups of protesters downtown LA. First and Spring, what you're looking at here, full screen, First and Spring. A skirmish, people in the crowd there milling about. But I don't see anything being thrown at police. And I would, it's weird, Bruce, when we cover these things from 300-400 feet in the air, and it's calm like that, and then all of a sudden you see a bunch of people just running, just taking off running. And very, very, in fact, they're going, they're not running, they're walking out, but any number of things can get that sort of a stampede going, can't it?
Yeah, it can. And, any protest, you have kind of an ebb and flow. It starts off maybe real peaceful, it gets ramped up, and then it kind of, like recedes back into the ocean. They kind of regroup. Maybe more people have seen this on social media and want to be a part of this. They'll head downtown, get involved, and then you have the resurgence of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have seen this kind of ebb and flow this evening. The earlier part of the evening, it was it was peaceful in the streets, and it grew and it moved and it got on the 110 freeway, and that seemed to get things got amped up and required a response from the CHP and the LAPD to get them off the freeway. You do see people facing them down now, officers facing down these demonstrators, and they've got, let me look at my screen here closely, weapons that you see being pointed at people. And again, it looks like the pepper ball thing that you were talking about, that green thing, that officer right there, the tree, aiming at the crowd, and the crowd moving as a skirmish line moves. So this is a tactic, right? You give them only one direction to go, right? You got to go that way.
Yeah, you're pushing the crowd on a route that you have decided this is a wide street. There's not a lot of windows or things that can be used against us. We're going to push them. The skirmish line moves up. They take territory. Crowd recedes. They take more territory, and they just keep going, with that until basically the crowd is not where you want them to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very methodical, very slow process, but it's something you have to do by the numbers.
Mm-hmm. And so I'm watching, there's the guy down in the front there. There's a guy who's taking pictures of the police from down below, on one knee. That guy right there. And how disconcerting is it for you? I was always told when I was out in the field, don't shine a light in the officer's eyes when they're on a skirmish line, because it blinds them temporarily. Is that something that is that true, or is that just lore?
No. It's true. And even officers, when they work night shift and they pull into the station, you turn off your headlights because you just destroyed someone's night blind. They're night blinded now. Mm-hmm. So you don't want to shine any lights like that at all. But the skirmish line, as they approach this guy, they're going to kind of maybe separate. The officers will then, take him into custody, or he's going to move. One or the other is going to happen. And it's just because we need to take this street, we need to take this territory, and you can't be in our operational area. That's the bottom line.
Yeah. Well, no fire set in LA. We can at least say that this evening. No fires have been set. Some property has been damaged. Two officers, to my knowledge, have been injured. A number of people have been arrested. No buildings have been set on fire, and there's another fire in San Francisco.
Don't open it up. Today it's Carswell.
Yeah, there it is. Something that they're kicking down the street. I don't know what that is, but they're just kind of kicking it around, and something has been set on fire there. I did see a bus stop earlier. So there is that happening in San Francisco. It looks like somebody's trying to put the fire out there. Somebody's trying to pour water on it to get it to go. Look at that. Yeah. So this is an example, isn't it? You've got folks of goodwill, good intention, who are there to get a point across. And then you've got the troublemakers. And it looks like the folks of goodwill won this one, because they put that fire out that this other person was trying to start. So it gives you hope. But then you see this. Minneapolis. Eruption erupting and continuing to erupt. This is very reminiscent to me of Los Angeles, April 29th, 1992. You were there. I was there. Our paths may have crossed at some point during that time without knowing who each other was. But, I was out on the streets then, and I'm guessing you were out there too, correct? Yeah, you said you were in the Firestone area on 92?
Having grown up in LA, I've watched you on the news for a long, long time, Mark.
Yeah, so we're both veterans of a lot of this stuff. Unfortunately, eruptions like this though are rare, and they are fueled by hopelessness. They are fueled by anger and things that go unaddressed. I mean, these don't. A happy population doesn't do this. Doesn't commit this sort of act, and people with hope, people with something to lose, don't do that. People who feel that they have been marginalized and have not been listened to. Martin Luther King said, "Riots are the language of the unheard," and to keep in mind here, it's a tragedy. It's a terrible thing to see. It's a terrible thing to go through and to witness. But it's not just out of nowhere.
Yeah, Mark, another thing which, you do have some people addressing, and obviously, these things shouldn't happen, but you also do the training, and the discipline, and what are we hiring as agencies around the nation? We have, God loves the military, but we do have a lot of military veterans that are coming back that are being hired on. And unfortunately, in police work, you can't point an an M16 at somebody and say you need to leave. You have to use command, presence, voice tactics to get compliance. So our tactics, our training, those are all suspect. And I think that's the bigger picture. But also, as you say, people are very frustrated with this. These things should not happen ever. The shootings, this case, they just should not happen.
Not only that they shouldn't happen, but that they keep happening. I think that's what's so frustrating. I'm as an African American man and a father of two children, trying to raise them in this nation.
Something very important. One of my best friends is a retired judge, and he has two African American kids also. And he's had to tell his kids how to act and how to think if you get pulled over by the police. That is just sad.
Oh, it's the truth. My dad gave me the same talk, and the concern I have now, I mean, it has stood me in good stead, having been stopped for speeding when I was in my just getting pulled over. But and what seems to happen, unfortunately, too often is compliance isn't enough. Sometimes whether you comply or not, something still happens to you, and that's extremely frustrating. And I think
there was a shooting, and I'm not going to get where it took place or the details, but it was a African American guy in a car, and he got stopped, and the officer asked him for his ID and everything, and he told the officer, "Okay, it's in my back pocket, but just so you know, I have a gun, but I have a license to carry it."
Right.
Now, what the officer heard was gun. Right. After the gun, so the guy reaches for his wallet because he thinks the officer heard him. The officer thinks he's going for a gun, and he shot and killed this guy.
Right. Philando Castile.
Yeah, it never should have happened.
Right. And that is where there's some training that needs to take place, but it has to be on a level beyond the tactical, because it's not always tactics that are at play here. It's attitude elements at play. You can train somebody. Don't put your knee for 8 minutes. And there are things you do, but you can't necessarily train somebody. and I'm playing to one of the theories, American men in particular, and assume that something unlawful is about to take place when dealing with, in particular, an African American man. And
yeah, you're right, and that is just a sad commentary. It really is.
Yeah, and so that's not a tactical. That's not something you can teach tactically. That's something that's got to go deeper. That's something that has to go to attitudes. That's something that has to go to why do you assume two people in the same, and to put these two people in the same situation and you react differently toward one than the other. That's something that's ingrained in the thing. And I'm not just singling out police officers here. I'm singling out everybody. I mean, the lady in the park the other day, the lady in Central Park, Amy.
In New York. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's not, and it's not necessarily abject hatred of black people. It's not necessarily people who are deeply prejudiced, but there's a lot of fear and a lot of misunderstanding. And unfortunately,
I remember there's a community that was policed by my agency, and they would actually get calls on suspicious people sitting at the bus bench. And so the people would be like, okay, what's going on? Well, he's sitting there. Okay, he's waiting for a bus. Well, you don't understand. And I know that we've heard these calls throughout the United States. Well, he's black.
Yeah.
Okay, but once again, I'm not into any of this, and it shouldn't. But you have people that are afraid. You have officers that are afraid. You have firemen. You have airline pilots, priests.
Yeah.
And people make judgment calls, and unfortunately it's sad.
Yeah, and unfortunately, people pay the price for that.
And they have, yeah.
And so what we're seeing is the frustration of that. It's a pretty ranging discussion we're having here as we're watching this all unfold here. What's all right, tell me where this is on the right. You can see a guy in a mask. This is downtown LA. People taking hammers to windows, and they're all dressed in black. These are the guys, these are the instigators here. And I hope we can zoom in on their faces and show them, because they just busted a window right there, blue pants, right there. And forgive me if you can hear a little anger in my voice, but I'm angry. Right?
And as you
busting open the door there. 7, you're seeing two views of it, from the ground and from the air. Both live, both real-time view here of 6 Spring Streets in downtown LA. A Starbucks being trashed and looted. Some of these folks wearing masks, some of these folks not, and some of them being caught in obvious acts of vandalism and larceny. And if the past is prologue, some of them will end up being prosecuted based on the images that you're seeing here. Because in 1992, one thing that occurred after months later was that police were going through video that had been recorded of the situation in April 29th and the riot that lasted 5 days. And people going into stores and looting, they were getting pictures of their faces, and they were trying their best to identify them, and they would bring them in. And so a lot of people got arrested and jailed based on images from the riots. So this may happen in this case, this guy in particular. He's breaking a window, running inside, and grabbing stuff. And you can hear the sirens now in the distance. It looks like heating up. They're coming. This is 6th and Spring coffee shop that has just been, the windows have been tapped, and the store has been looted. And you're seeing folks arriving right now. I don't know. These look like private security people. These look like a private security agency that has shown up, and they're setting their bicycles up as kind of a barrier, and they're trying to keep people out of the Starbucks. So they have gotten there. I did hear sirens during that from that CNN crew on the ground. It sounded like police were arriving on the scene, but I don't see them yet. And the crowd, meanwhile, has moved on. They have moved on, I believe, a southerly direction down Spring Street. All right. All right, Chris Christie in Air 7 HD. Chris, what can you tell us?
Hey there, Mark. Just coming up on the intersection of Broadway and First Street. Call went out just about maybe a minute and a half ago. An LAPD officer calling for help, and instantly you could see a number of skirmish lines at the intersection with I would say, a moderate crowd across the street here. So there was a confrontation. Things got heated. An officer was surrounded. He called for help, and in a matter of seconds, help has arrived, and there are now dozens of law enforcement officers at this intersection. Just a microcosm of what we've been seeing. And there are so many LAPD officers, all over downtown. And I'm going to reiterate something that I said earlier in the evening. As far as the eye can see from up here in Air 7 HD, still, the 10 freeway off my nose, looking out the right, the 101 freeway, every direction I look, every freeway has lines of LAPD officers with their sirens on, rushing to the downtown area. It looks just the same as it did when we went to get fuel a short time ago, and they're still arriving in huge numbers. The department on citywide tactical alert. They're staying past their shifts. They're calling in officers who are off duty on their days off, some on vacation, and they are arriving in huge numbers to get this situation under control. Obviously, the situation has evolved throughout the night. It certainly appears that what started as a large group has kind of splintered off into a number of smaller groups. They're scattered across the city. We're not too far from LAPD headquarters. You're looking at that Starbucks just a moment ago on Spring Street. We saw the 110 freeway shut down earlier this evening. They've covered a lot of ground. They've zigzagged their way through downtown. Some peaceful, but peaceful ones are few and far between now, as they really could be looking for trouble and causing commotion, especially when they get in the face of law enforcement. Really, I don't know, just at a certain point, it's one thing to get the point across, but they are antagonizing these officers until there's no choice but to, this physical contact. It takes one miscalculation. Somebody pushes, somebody shoves. You see the pushing and shoving across town. Officers using great restraint, but this is what we're looking at.
Got folks down in the intersection there, and you saw that Starbucks there at 6th and Spring that was looted. The skirmish line forming there, so they will form. And you're at Broadway and what again?
This is Broadway and First, and now we understand that two officers are down. Two officers are down a few blocks from here at Spring and too far from our location. Bear with us as we swing the camera over and move over towards 2nd Street, up and to the, up left, and we should have something behind this building here. We'll see what the commotion is all about, but a call just went out for two officers down. So let's take a look here behind this building, and we'll see what we see. As we go around this corner here, I saw some patrol cars on the other side, but this obviously is the area where the subway was constructed. Here comes a group of officers, a strike team traveling on 2nd Street. This is Broadway, so we need to go up one more to Spring, which is going to be one to the top. Yeah, right up there. That intersection looks clear. So we'll look around here, Mark, but certainly the calls are coming out fast and furious, so we'll keep an eye out.
All right.
Oh, here we go. We've got some ambulances. Got one ambulance with a number of patrol cars and escort here. Is he picking somebody up, or is he already wondering? It looks like LA City Fire Light Force on the way to a call, and that might very well be what we're looking at here.
Okay, and he's going up, having to go up on the curb. There's a Tesla sitting there in the middle of the road, kind of cockeyed.
Very odd, yeah.
Yeah, or a Mercedes.
Yeah, Mercedes, yeah.
Just apparently nobody behind the wheel. It's just sitting there. All right, well, we'll try to make sense of this. Again, a report of two officers who may be injured. That would bring forward the number of officers that have been reported injured this evening so far in downtown LA. Things have definitely taken a turn since the sun went down, and as the night has worn on, the people who were involved in the peaceful protest that began this afternoon at about 5:30, it appears most of them have gone, and what's left are people, a lot of people, I should say, I guess, that are bent on causing problems.
Bring it back to second and spring.
All right. So he's
looks like LA City. Something we've got. LAPD is looking at something right here, right on my left window, Rob. Looks like they've got their searchlight on a skirmish line in an alleyway, and some pedestrians running here. I wonder what they're running from. Maybe if you tilt up, I wonder if what's he looking for there. It's very interesting.
That parking lot is clearing out.
Does she know we're on the air? Okay. Let's swing it over to second and spring again. Here comes that ambulance who made the turn. And it looks like that. I mean, that LAPD, okay, it looks like they've come to a stop there, firefighting out of the vehicle. And there is another group of officers. We'll see what we see here. I just trying to look around these buildings, always tricky here in downtown LA, Mark, as you know. But it does look like the LA City Fire has reached the destination they're called. They don't seem to be moving very frantically. It looks like maybe, down on the, no, I don't know. I'm not sure what to make of this, but this is the vicinity of where that call came from. Maybe that officer right there approached the ambulance. Maybe he got shoved around. Not sure. Not sure the nature of the injury, but the call was that the two officers needed help. And so this is help arriving at the intersection of Spring and Second.
Okay, well, we're hoping, based on the body language of everybody involved, that the officers aren't badly injured. Appears not. We'll try to get an update if we can. That brings to 4 kind of our unofficial count of the LA police officers who have been injured this evening. No official count of civilians who've been hurt. No official count of the number of arrests that have been made. And no word on when this thing will end up being over. This could be a very, very long night in the city of Los Angeles. The view on the right, 3rd and Spring. It's about 2 blocks away from, about 3 blocks away where that 2 blocks away from where the Starbucks was looted. And what we're seeing, that's a guy running around with a fire extinguisher. He just
look at that alleyway where that light is. They're trying to get a crowd under control in that alleyway, it sounds like. So a group of officers, I'm not sure, Mark, can you hear me, Mark?
Yes, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, it looks like a group of officers in an alleyway just north of 3rd Street. Apparently they're trying to prevent the crowd from getting past 3rd Street. So they're starting to use these skirmish lines to kind of draw lines and really limit the movement of some of these protests. Earlier, large groups has really splintered off into smaller groups of individuals, some on scooters, some on skateboards, some riding bicycles. But the ones that they can kind of corral and box in, those are the ones that they're focusing on. Focus on boxing in groups, because remember, they have already declared an unlawful assembly. So once they do that, if the crowd is still acting up, then those are the ones that are going to start getting arrested when they're in a position to do it. The only way they can get into that position is by boxing groups and using those skirmish lines to form impromptu perimeters. And then, as we've seen in the past, they'll start going one by one with the hand ties and handcuffs and begin taking the worst offenders into custody. The big tip-off there is when you see those skirmish lines moving, and that's what you see right here. Here's a skirmish line with officers marching down the street. They mean business, and those protesters are going to either have to give up peacefully and stay in place or run in the opposite direction. Some of them, as you see, are just bent on antagonizing them. They get eyeball to eyeball with these officers. They scream, they yell, they take their cell phones out, and they try and provoke law enforcement. And so law enforcement, obviously, these LA's finest, obviously, trained, as you mentioned, Mark, to bring the temperature down and deal with these situations as tough as it may be. But it looks like a pretty large cluster here that they've been able to kind of corral at the intersection of, I think that's going to be Spring and 3rd Street. So they're marching down Spring Street. You see some protesters with their hands in the air kind of testing these officers, not really budging. It looks like they've come a little pause there, and they're just basically trying to approach the intersection, get everybody in that intersection, and form almost like a skirmish line on all four sides of the intersection.
Wow. Okay. Well, we see the movement, and we see people backing up, and LA police moving forward, pushing the crowd. And again, it does seem to be a much smaller crowd, a much less dense crowd than was out earlier in the evening demonstrating. And what we're seeing now, what are we seeing on the spring and forth? A bunch of people. I'm not sure what that building is that people to and out of. Whether that's being actively looted right now, doesn't appear to be because of the skirmish line right there. So you're looking here.
So this is.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Christina, this is spring and forth.
You're at
so they're basically.
Right. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mark. I was just talking to our assignment desk simultaneously. So yeah, we're just continuing to watch this group of officers. As you see, just in the last minute, they've moved that entire crowd. Very interesting tactic here that we see often. They've moved about 100 people a full city block just in the last 2 minutes, just by utilizing that skirmish line, steadily marching forward, and you see the crowd basically forced to back up, give up, go in a different direction. It's a little bit of a game of cat and mouse, but when you finally get to the intersection, they're just basically surrounded by additional LAPD officers that are ready. Now, you just hope there's no confrontation like we've seen, though, and unfortunately we've seen too many confrontations tonight, some involving physical shoving and pushing and other fireworks and things being thrown at officers. And then you've seen occasionally in situations where LAPD even has to retreat, and that's like what we're looking at here. It looks like there's been something thrown, and that is I'm hearing that something has been thrown. And you can see a little look at now the crowd running in an opposite direction. Not sure if they're running from tear gas or if they're running from something else that has been launched into the crowd. That is all part of the fog chaos here. Just unclear sometimes where the things are being launched from. We saw fireworks earlier. We've seen canisters, tear gas canisters being launched by law enforcement, and then we've seen bottles being thrown by other protesters. So a little hard to make out who's tossing what sometimes, especially as you peer around these tall buildings. But they seem to be making progress, pushing the crowd south on Spring Street.
All right, and what we're looking at here, it appears, are two views of the same event from a couple of slightly different angles, both at Spring and 4th Street, essentially. And you're watching this skirmish line that's really getting what appears to be the largest group of protesters now that's on Spring Street. That's where a lot of chaos has happened. That's where we saw the Starbucks being damaged. We saw the windows being smashed and the Starbucks coffee shop being looted. Now you got more. You got some physical. You got some. Somebody's going to get arrested. Somebody's going to get hurt here if they're not careful.
Yep. Several protesters, different pockets of them, pushing back on those law enforcement officers, shoving, pushing, and that's enough to get you arrested, as you mentioned, obviously. But again, we don't see many people being taken into custody. We've seen a couple of isolated detainments earlier, but really the goal seems to be not to arrest people, but to push this crowd further down the block. And I guess that seems to be the tactic. They're moving, despite all that pushing and shoving, they're continuing to march forward around these parked cars, right down the block here, and I wonder what's waiting for them the next intersection. My guess is a whole other set of officers arm in arm, and we'll see if they start making arrests at some point. That again, this is an unlawful assembly at this point, and they have the right to take these people into custody if they can manage to do that.
Well,
but the crowd is very rowdy.
They don't want to. I can tell you that because A, it's too much paperwork. B, the jails. They don't want it. They don't want more people in the jails because remember, we've got this pandemic. Kind of the overlay over all of this is coronavirus is still very much a factor in the decision making of both public agencies, private companies as well. They don't want to put people in jails and then have to worry about them dealing with the coronavirus or getting ill. So that may be part of the consideration here. But
Mark, I've spoken to several LAPD officers. Yeah, he's really pushing. He's out of control. One of his buddies threw a cone directly at a police officer, and he is putting up a real struggle. He's going to be taken in. I have spoken to several LAPD officers the past couple of weeks, especially as folks have started to venture out, and there's been a little bit of an uptick in various crimes. The number of arrests are not corresponding with the crime, because in all too many cases, they keep them in jail. They are basically, even if they're being detained and taken in, it's a matter of minutes or a couple of hours before they're simply caught and released. They get processed, they get their fingerprints taken, and they basically are told to go home. There's almost, unless you're talking about a major felony, there are the very few arrests taking place right now due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
I wonder if the people in the crowd know that. I wonder if they can either sense that or get a feeling for that. And
I think they can. I think in some neighborhoods they absolutely have taken note of that, because, again, they go back and a lot of them are repeat offenders. That's not to call anybody in group criminal by any means, but certainly as a peaceful protest has devolved into something much different throughout the evening. And these people, and obviously we understand there's a lot of frustration. People are unemployed. They are desperate for, they're frustrated. They are going through all of the things that we're all going through in life, and this is their outlet on this particular occasion, where they are, in some cases, basically using the George Floyd killing basically cause trouble. So something has been launched into the crowd. They run, and they're basically onto the next intersection, where I can guarantee you they will end up calling for more law enforcement to surround the next block. Here's another scuffle at the intersection now of Spring Street and 5th Street. But that must have been about 50 people who went running the other way on Spring Street, and you hope that they don't just try and break into the next Starbucks or cause more havoc.
This is a dude that lost his shoe. Someone's being restrained by people in the crowd. People in the crowd are trying to basically police themselves, saying, don't antagonize the police. I just watched something unfold there where you could see somebody lost a shoe, somebody picked it up and tried to get it to him, but he was too close to the police, and there was a whole thing that happened there.
The question at a certain point, obviously, we have the luxury of discussing this and asking this question in an abstract way. The question is why? Why at this point of the night would you do this? You've made your point. You've expressed frustration. We're all upset about what happened in Minneapolis, but at a certain point, the sun goes down and things tend to go sideways for no apparent reason sometimes, and it's just unfortunate. It's the nature of these type of mob situations. This is, I think, I wouldn't go so far to call this a riot, a very animated protest with a lot of menacing behaviors. There's some looting. We've obviously seen that Starbucks a short time ago. Look at this. Here's a woman who obviously did something to get the attention of these officers, and they are tackling her at the corner of Spring and 5th. So this woman came out. I'm not sure what they saw her doing or what she did to provoke that. She did put her hand in the air, and then you saw that group of all take her down. The rest of them continue on. I wonder what she did in that case.
Well, it'll be adjudicated if she ends up being charged. She's clearly being detained. We don't know if she's been arrested. Sometimes people get hooked up and put in handcuffs, and then later even taken into the station, just released. That's made at the field level to just not go ahead and arrest that person, just to
exactly right.
For a while. So
let's go ahead and do an orbit around that intersection. Let's see what the other side looks like. It looks like a maybe a standoff developing at this next intersection. That's okay. Now looking between 5th and 6th Street. So a bulk of that crowd now essentially loitering and testing the patience of these officers. I mean, like you said, if they have the feeling or already know that they're not going to have to pay any consequences for their behavior, and the chances of even getting arrested are relatively low, the next question becomes, well, how does this end? I mean, how does this end when you have a group of, I think, at least from what I can tell, maybe the crowd started at a couple hundred or maybe a little more. I think at least in this particular intersection and behind them, there can't be more than 75 to 100 at the very most. But how do you get control of 75 or 100 people and tell them to go home unless you're going to take all of them, to jail, which we know that's not going to happen.
Right. That guy at the center of your screen, if you tilt up just a little bit, the guy that's in that white jersey, that guy we saw run into the Starbucks, grab a sandwich and a bottle of water, and basically loot the place, involved in looting the place. Now he is sitting down the street, but this he's just was involved in that. That's well documented. We got it from the ground level, and now we're getting it from Air 7. This guy was one of several people involved in kind of looting that Starbucks store down at 6th and Spring. And to the of your screen is another ground level shot, and that is basically right next to the Starbucks at 6th and Spring at that same intersection where people are still gathered and where damage is still being done. And,
I'm sorry. I look at that. A much larger crowd further up Spring Street, and I don't see the officers around them. So that larger crowd that we saw maybe 5 minutes ago that went running up Spring Street is now gathered between 6th and 7th Street, I think is what we're looking at here. And it even looks like surrounding some of the cars driving by.
Yeah, what we're watching here is the situation devolving, and you did see you reported from your vantage point a whole slew of LAPD vehicles streaming into downtown. Yes, where citywide tactical alert has been declared, and was declared actually hours ago by the LAPD. Yeah. I mean, I think when I got into work afternoon, that tactical alert was already in place. Oh, they turned the lights on in the Starbucks store.
All right, so they've either given the go-ahead to begin taking people in custody or just try and disperse the crowd. In any event, look at that man that you were talking about, Mark, get shoved to the ground there. I think he's going to get taken in, maybe not even. See, they're just...
I think they're concentrating on people who are either trying to hurt police or hurt others. I think they're restricting it at this point in terms of arrests to people who are a physical threat to either the police or to other civilians who are out there. This guy, clearly, we saw him loot. We saw him steal. We saw him, I saw him, well, I'm not going to say, several people are involved in breaking windows at that Starbucks store and going in and breaking stuff and stealing stuff. He was clearly inside the store. But they're going to let that guy, he gets a pass. He gets a pass on that. Yeah, unless he does something else to him.
Unbelievable. And this always gets my attention when you see pedestrians of any kind, whether they're protesters or whoever, and vehicles who are finding themselves in these situations, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally, the potential for somebody getting hurt, somebody miscalculating and stepping on the gas and driving through a crowd of people. It's something that we've seen all too often over the years. We saw it just a couple nights ago, I think maybe last night in Denver, people got run over. We were over a situation, a much smaller protest in Hollywood earlier this afternoon when an officer drove up on the small crowd of maybe 20 to 25 protesters and accidentally backed up into one of them, almost knocking him to the ground. Again, it was innocent. It was an unintentional thing. But when you have vehicles so close, whether they're law enforcement vehicles or civilian vehicles, so close to these pedestrians and protesters, somebody can get hurt, and that's the paramount reason they try and keep the protesters off freeways altogether. This group, the group that's been protesting all day today, was intent on finally making it to a freeway to get as much attention as possible, and they eventually did. They made their way to the 110 freeway on several occasions and shut down traffic. Now it's a game of cat and mouse with these police officers, trying to basically provoke them. The skirmish line moves them, and then they run down the block to another intersection. We've seen this, I think, already 3 times in the last 20 minutes.
Well, I've never seen people bring scooters to a riot, but I guess this is a first. I see people riding these scooters. So what direction? I think they're still heading south. Is that right? Spring?
Still heading south of Ring. Somebody's gotten a hold of a fire extinguisher and is now deploying that at just basically in the air, not really in anybody's specific direction, but somebody is obviously a fire extinguisher from somewhere, and now just releasing that into the air.
Well, this has been a difficult evening at the end, but a very difficult week. And the day began with us talking about the death of George Floyd and the arrest of one of the police officers, and tear gas now being deployed. And it has gone from that to coverage of this in downtown Los Angeles.
Is that the Starbucks you guys were looking at earlier?
I believe
We're
so.
back at Spring and 6th. I did see some
That's
damage
the one.
at that Starbucks. So that intersection has been, somewhat clear. Obviously, lots of paper and debris in the road there. But clearly you can see officers firing tear gas down the block and towards this crowd. Kind of peculiar, actually, because the crowd is so dispersed. You don't see that dense crowd that we saw earlier. In fact, I'm sure if we tilt up, you could probably see that larger crowd that is just moved on the block, further south on Spring Street. I can hear, maybe I'm from ICOM, I can hear the shots being fired of those tear gas canisters in my ear. I thought that was coming from the scanner. I apologize. But I don't even know if it's reaching. I don't even know if it's reaching this group of protesters. I mean, they're a couple hundred feet away. You know what? For all of the similar protests that we've seen, such as this, I don't know how this one ends. I just don't know how it ends until everybody gets tired and decides to go home. If they're not going to make arrests and they're not going to shut down, tear gas is only going to be so effective. How determined are these people to cause trouble and cause damage? It's just anybody's guess, I imagine.
Yeah, well, they seem pretty intense because some damage has been done, and 4 police officers have been injured, and people are still on the move. What it seems to me, and again, I'm looking at it from your vantage point here. You're several hundred feet there, but it seems like something has changed in the last, 10, 15 minutes in terms of the temperature of the crowd, in terms of the malevolence of the crowd of people down there. This is a different group from the protesters that we saw earlier.
Yeah, the signs are gone. There's just no reason for half of these people to even be out tonight. I mean, they're not protesting anymore. This is not a protest by my definition. I just wonder how much. I mean, look at that. Some people tossing barricades into storefronts. Another scuffle as people. I mean, the other risk that you have every time these skirmish lines move down the block, you have these almost stampedes of people where there's tremendous potential for people to get hurt when you have people running in all different directions. People get run over by a group of other people, and people often get hurt that way in these types of crowds. So the march continues down Spring Street. We've now traveled all the way to 8th Street, and if we tilt up, I don't see any end in sight. I mean, they can take us all the way to the 10 freeway, and then what? I don't know.
And then they're still in a cutting zone. They're still in a zone that has been declared an unlawful assembly in the city of Los Angeles. I want to see if I can call that image back up of where the tactical or where the unlawful assembly area has been declared. And it's from the 10 freeway 101 and from the 110 to Alameda.
Right.
That is basically all of what you would call downtown LA.
All of downtown LA.
And it has all been declared an unlawful assembly. Everybody that's out right now is out unlawfully, with the exception of the media and the police. And you just saw people, some guy try to throw something through a window down there out on the street. As they walk down the street, they're just causing damage. They're causing more damage, breaking windows. And yeah, this does seem to be a different crowd from when things began. Downtown LA, these are live pictures. This is live.
It almost, keep saying cat and mouse. It just feels like these people are being like a game. They're treating the game thing. They're just meaningless vandalism. Just no purpose for this type of behavior. There's just none. There's just no reason for it. They should be punished, but it doesn't appear that there's going to be many consequences for most of these people.
Wow. A bunch of folks on the move here. Now this is where right now?
This is going to be Spring Street, just south of 8th, and I think they just ran into a parking structure, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe between the buildings. If we can, and we'll come around on 8th and see where that crowd's going. It's interesting at this point. Crowds are moving in all different directions. Look at this. You got signs being dragged. I didn't even realize earlier. We were wondering what was blocking the 110 freeway. They literally tore highway signs down and used those highway signs to block the freeway earlier. They're just taking whatever they can find, whatever they can get their hands on. In this case, a dumpster to shove in the middle of the road there. Just no real rhyme or reason. Just very random, very menacing behavior. It's just getting worse, and for all of the law enforcement that I've been talking about, for all of the leaders that are in this vicinity, I'm trying to read the tea leaves and determine what their tactic is. That's my biggest question now is just what is the tactic for LAPD in this situation? What is the goal here? If not to disperse the crowd, because the crowd is actually dispersed. You see random groups, small groups, large groups, but the crowd, the original crowd, is large burst throughout this part of downtown right now. Like I said, if it was a more typical skirmish line where they would box people in and begin sending arrest teams into that little containment zone and begin taking people into hand ties one by one and making arrests. That's not happening here. If that's not the goal, then what is it? The question is, what is it? What is the tactic here for LAPD? It's the biggest question on my mind right now.
Typically, they will do is they will try to get, just like they're doing, to get the crowd to splinter and disperse, splinter and disperse groups, and then go in and get the folks that you can identify that have caused the big problems and just wait for everybody else to basically leave the area. But, right now, it's still big enough where it's causing problems, still big enough where damage is being caused, and where people are, frankly, in danger. Several different views here on the left, Main and 9th, and Spring. On the left, 8th and Spring. Or sorry, on the right, 8th and Spring. So Spring Street. We're 45 seconds away from a cut-in. I'm going to do a live cut-in here on ABC 7. So if you will forgive me while during this stream, I'm going to have to break away from you for a little bit, and then we'll get right back to it. And then, of course, coverage will continue on 8/7 on television. I hope you will join us.
A minute here, and
Breaking now, LAPD officers clash with protesters as anger explodes downtown. Several officers hurt, the situation out of control. The scene similar coast to coast as rioters rampage from Atlanta to Washington, D.C.
Okay, so
Eyewitness News live with the unfolding unrest. Next.
Hey, her phone. My tablet ain't charged. I'll charge it. Come on, let's go charge it.
And yeah, this does seem to be a different crowd from when we began. Downtown LA, these are live pictures. This is live.
It almost, I keep saying cat and mouse. It just feels like these people are treating it like a game. They're treating it like a game. They're just meaningless vandalism. Just no purpose for this type of behavior. There's just none. There's just no reason for it. They should punish. Doesn't appear that there's going to be many consequences for most of these people.
Wow. Folks on the move here. Now, this is where right now?
This is going to be Spring Street, just south of 8th, and I think they just ran into a parking structure, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe between the buildings. Let's go ahead, if we can, and we'll come around on 8th and see where that crowd's going. You know, it's interesting at this point that the crowds are moving in all different directions. I mean, look at this. You got signs being dragged. I didn't even realize earlier we were wondering what was blocking the Penn Freeway. They literally tore highway signs down and used those highway signs to block the freeway earlier. They're just taking whatever they can find, whatever they can get their hands on. Case a dumpster to shoving the middle of the road there. just no real rhyme or reason, just very random, very menacing behavior. This is it's just worse, and for all of the law enforcement that I've been talking about, for all of the officers that are in this vicinity, I'm trying to read the tea leaves and determine what their tactic is. That's my biggest question now is just what is the tactic for LAPD in this situation? What is the goal here? If not to disperse the crowd, because the crowd is actually dispersed. I mean, you see random groups, small groups, large groups, but the real crowd is largely dispersed throughout this part of downtown right now. Like I said, if it was a more typical skirmish line where they would box people in and begin sending arrest teams into that pool, begin taking people into hand ties one by one and making arrests. That's not happening here. And that's not the goal. The question is, what is it? What is the tactic here for LAPD? That's the biggest question on my mind right now.
Yeah, what typically they will do is they will try to get, just like they're doing, to get the crowd to splinter into smaller and smaller groups, and then go in and get the folks that you can identify that have caused the big problems, and just wait for everybody else to basically leave the area. But, right now, it's still big enough where it's causing problems, still big enough where damage is being caused, and where people are frankly in danger. We're looking at several different views here. On the left, that is Main and 9th and Spring. On the left, 8th and Spring. Or sorry, on the right, 8th and Spring. Spring Street. We're 45 seconds away from a live cutting here on ABC 7. So if you will forgive me during this stream, I'm going to have to break away from you for a little bit, and then we'll get right back to it. And then, of course, our coverage will continue live on ABC 7 on television. I hope you will join us.
A minute here, and
6th Street, and as you
Is it worth it? Destroying the other people's businesses that they can't replace. These people that have these businesses, how are they supposed to replace their merchandise? Look at these people destroying their own city. Does that even make sense? We are barely getting out of quarantine right now, and you see people only buck wild over one people's death. Does that, how people are supposed to go back to work? How are they supposed to work? How are they supposed to support their family? And they're destroying their own jobs that they're supposed to go back to. Does this make any sense at all, people? How am I supposed to go back to work? You have people acting like idiots, setting buildings on fire, protesting out of control. Exactly. Majority of them are young people. Where are their parents? Why are their parents letting them run rapid all over the city? This is why.
Starting at the city hall, in the city hall area,
Excuse me,
down
guys.
to sketchy situation.
Why is parents all of a sudden have their kids running around downtown LA? They not just hurting themselves, but they're hurting other people. This should not be going on right now. They should be in their homes doing what kids do, playing video games, while their mothers and fathers prepare for work. Give me 1 second, I'll be right back. Hold on. Sorry for all the noise in the background. My niece is up, but this is, I'm trying to wrap my mind around this because this is in my city. Last night, I saw 3 hella outside my window, flashing lights on the protesters that were protesting in that city. I'm okay, Lord Traffic. You know, it's just that it just don't make sense to me over one person's death. I understand that, his death was wrong. It was really wrong. But at the same time, what gives people the right to destroy other people's businesses? That they have to support their family. That is their bread and butter. And now their businesses are gone. It's no more. We have all these cops. The next thing you know, the military, just like in Minnesota, is going to be on their way to LA because this is just getting out of control. But thank God that did not happen. The police was able to get it under control without. Give me 1 second. Stop! Kiva, let's go. Sorry, you guys, my niece is acting up. She's acting a fool this morning, but thank God there was no military has to be called. But last night, the Mayor Garcetti had to call the National Guards, though, to calm down this protest. It's just so ridiculous how things just go out of control. And these kids are getting hurt without the parents. Being parents and whooping their kids' ass. Like, come on, dude. Let's be real here. I'm going to go back to the news.
It is gradually moving. So the decision has
Hi, I'm Kara, and
It's ridiculous.
Obviously frustrated in their own right. They have their own issues with police, but it is turned into a free-for-all, and they are using this, it seems to me, as an opportunity to cause random destruction, cause just random violence, if you will. I mean, at one point earlier this evening, when it come to a head over Pershing Square, where one of those officers was hurt that you mentioned, it really took an ugly turn. I mean, they were tossing garbage cans and trash at these officers. We've got some video to roll from you from a little bit earlier of one of the LAPD cruisers just being completely trashed, one with the windows completely smashed in, graffiti is a lot with spray paint, any building that they can find. We can't breathe. They've spray painted all kinds of anti-police rhetoric on different buildings and different landmarks, and it was an ugly scene. Things really ugly turn during the 7 o'clock hour as the sun began to set, and it's only gotten worse since then.
And all of this, of course, in response to a very ugly incident, in fact, an ugly series of incidents involving African Americans who have been killed by police. In one case, the accusation against the officer is murder. The officer in Minneapolis charged today with the murder of George Floyd. And so what we're seeing is an eruption of anger and a reaction to that anger that has taken a turn that is destructive in its own right. And it's difficult to watch. All of it has been difficult to deal with and watch all week, both the video and the reaction to it and the death of George Floyd. It's all been very, very difficult to deal with. Worth noting, something that I've noticed is the diversity of the crowd. The crowd, both the peaceful and the non-peaceful elements of this event, if you want to call it tonight, have really reflected what LA looks like. I have seen people of all colors, all ages. Now, as you mentioned, Chris, it does seem to be younger people who are out now, but these are younger people of all different ethnicities that seem to be gathered on the streets tonight, either just refusing to disperse.
Yeah, it's a point that I think can't be repeated enough. Although I think we are talking about two different groups when we refer to the protesters that were marching earlier in the day versus the more malevolent that's really been acting up this evening. Just a disappointing thing altogether. In this case here, we have another intersection, 8th and Broadway, where they've actually used some of the LAPD cruisers to block off the intersection, not just skirmish lines, but actual cruisers to block off the intersection with arrest teams. Those are what we typically would call arrest teams. I don't know that they're going to make any arrests, but those are teams that are prepared to push through if this crowd begins to build up at this intersection. I'm not sure exactly.
Arresting dozens of protesters as the damage and danger continue.
It's unsafe. It's an unlawful assembly. It's dangerous for all the residents and others. And so it's unfortunate. It's a dark day in our history that we have to do this. But this is what's going to save lives, and this is what's going to save property.
Chief Moore saying he is extremely disappointed.
Chanting, we're not really hearing. All we're seeing is folks who have the motive. Would you say that's a pretty...
It was going to be a peaceful protest. He does not like the way that it has taken.
That were marching earlier in the day versus the more malevolent crowd it is turned into a free-for-all, and they are using this, it seems to me, as an opportunity to cause random destruction, cause just random violence, if you will. I mean, at one point earlier this evening, when it did come to a head over at Pershing Square, where one of those officers was hurt that you missed.
This is still downtown LA.
Garbage cans and trash at these officers. We've got some video to roll from you from a little bit earlier of one of the LAPD cruisers just being completely trashed. We saw one with the windows completely smashed in, graffiti. There's a lot of vandals out here with spray paint tagging any building that they can find. We can't breathe. They've spray painted all kinds of anti-police rhetoric on different buildings and different landmarks. And it was really took an ugly turn during the 7 o'clock hour as the sun began to set, and it's only gotten worse since then.
All of this, of course, in response to a very ugly incident, in fact, an ugly series of incidents involving African Americans who have been killed by police. In one case, the accusation against the officer is murder. That officer in Minneapolis charged today with the murder of George Floyd. And so what we're seeing is an eruption of anger and a reaction to that anger that has taken a turn that is destructive in its own right. And it's difficult to watch. All of it has been difficult to deal with and watch all week, both the video and the reaction to it and the death of George Floyd. It has all been very, very difficult to deal with. Worth noting, too, something that I've noticed is the diversity of the crowd. The crowd, both the peaceful and the non-peaceful elements of this event, if you want to call it tonight, have really reflected what LA looks like. I've seen people of all colors, all ages. Now, as you mentioned, Chris, it does seem to be younger people who are out now, but these are younger people of all different ethnicities that seem to be gathered on the streets tonight, either doing mayhem or just refusing to disperse.
Yeah, it's a point that I think can't be repeated enough. So I think we're talking about two different groups when we refer to the protesters that were marching earlier in the day versus the more malevolent crowd that's really had been acting up this evening. Just a disappointing thing altogether. In this case here, we have another intersection, 8th and Broadway, where they've actually used some of the LAPD cruisers to block off the intersection, not just skirmish lines, but actual cruisers to block off the intersection. Teams, those typically would call arrest teams. I don't know that they're going to make any arrests, but those are strike teams that are prepared to push through if this crowd begins to build up at this intersection. I'm not sure exactly why they chose this intersection, but it wasn't more than a few minutes ago as we went on the air that this intersection was indeed packed with demonstrators. And what started as a large group a little bit earlier across the city has really turned into much smaller, splintered groups, many more individuals running bike on scooters, just causing trouble and vandalizing these buildings.
Okay, Chris Christie, we will check back with you throughout this newscast. There are more protests happening here in Southern California and across the country. This one in Rancho Cucamonga earlier, hundreds of people there taking to the streets. No reports of injuries there. The San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department says so far no one has been arrested there. Protesters also clashing with the Secret Service tonight outside the White House. This happening after a separate protest earlier in the day, and at the protest tonight, demonstrators could be seen pulling and tugging at the metal barriers, even knocking some of them down, those barriers between officers and protesters. And this in Atlanta, police barricading themselves inside the lobby of the CNN Center as a mob of irate protesters masses outside the building and threatens to break inside. The tense confrontation punctuated after some sort of a flashbang or firework into the lobby, where, as you see here, it exploded in a shower of sparks. Shortly after that, police fired tear gas, and they were able to disperse demonstrators onto nearby streets. And, of course, tension simmering in Minneapolis, where this all began. Here's a live look right now, the epicenter of the protests as demonstrators ignored the 8 p.m. curfew that was put in place by local leaders. A post office, a bank, and a restaurant were among the buildings set on fire this evening, a number of them burning, as you can see here. This looks like a strip mall there, but people once again used violence to express their anger against law enforcement there in Minneapolis. Officers also reported shots fired at them as units moved in to control some of those crowds. Again, this is where George Floyd was killed, and the officer who killed him charged with murder. Demonstrators also clashed with officers in New York City today outside the Barclays Center. More than 100 people detained there for throwing bottles and other disturbances. Folks moved up to the 88 police precinct in Brooklyn demonstrators, protesters there where police cars were vandalized. Dozens more people were arrested there, and about a dozen officers were injured. And just a short time ago, we got our first look at the jail booking photo for Officer Chauvin in Minneapolis. All right, we're going to go back out to Chris Christie, a report of a fire that has broken out. Let's get to it. Chris, where are you and what are you seeing?
Yeah, we're a few blocks away now at Hill Street and Olympic Boulevard, where a large crowd was gathered just a moment ago. A fire started ash can, and then they started throwing fireworks. Fire, visual caught our attention for sure, and now LAPD with a fire extinguisher to put out this trash fire. They did just call for a large amount of backup to disperse the crowd. There's also some protesters, or I should say rioters at this point, at the point of the night, actually confronting some motorists a few blocks away from here. So we'll try and get a visual of that coming up in just a minute.
Everybody's putting the fire out. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.
Sorry about that. Something went wrong, but I'm done here. Like, comment, and subscribe. See you in the next live stream.